Welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast Indestructible Souls. Happy Sunday. Thank you all for tuning in and joining. Tonight I have a very special guest, and we'll get to that in a minute. Um, so thank you all for who continue to tune in and support the podcast and offer feedback, positive feedback, who offer support and things like that. This is Indestructible Souls. The podcast is for mental wellness for African American men and boys. However, for the holidays and for the last couple of weeks, we have took a detour to talk about grief in these times. And so one of the things that I talked about last week is holiday blues. And so last week we kind of talked about the things and how people have, you know, go through depression, go through relive grief in the time of the holidays. And so one of the things I know people often, whether someone passed away this year, there's the COVID, there's a lot of things that's going on, and we have lost loved ones, and loved ones have passed either this year or recently, and the holidays is just a time of grief. And so here we are. I felt like it was beneficial for us to learn not only to talk about grief, but learn a new way of adjusting, new way of helping us get through that grief. And so tonight's topic is not just about mental wellness and mental wellness in African American men and boys. This is about just grieving in general. And so I do have a special guest that's going to join us. And right now I'm going to try to fix some of the technical difficulties um, that we sometimes have when we go live, but we're going to get it together. And so I have the author of the book, and it looks like she lost her connection, and I'm going to get it back. And so, I'm going to be working while we're trying to get reconnected. And so, just forgive us for a minute, but we're going to work it out because this is what happens when, you try to do good work. And so, if I pause, just know that I'm trying to multitask and hey, it is what it is. So I'm back. I sent her a new link and hopefully she can get on. Um, so just 1 second, real quick, because I can't multitask. It is what it is. All right. So here we are tonight, and we're going to talk about grief in general, but we're going to take a different approach. So I have the author of the book, and I'm going to put the book up. The author of the book, Good Grief. Her name is Natasha Sims. And let me go ahead and try to multitask again. So y'all just gonna have to deal with it tonight because one of these days I'm gonna get a producer that's gonna be able to do all of this stuff. Well, so since that button's not working, here we go. I can't figure it out. So one of these days I'm gonna take a class on how to do this. Hold on, let me see. Did I get it? Uh-oh. Here we go. So I hope you guys can see that. So tonight we have a very special guest, and we're going to be talking about grief. But more importantly, we're going to talk about Natasha's journey through grief and giving a different perspective on grieving in general. Natasha was born and raised in Southern California and now resides in Arizona. She is a proud parent of three. She is a woman who has experienced great triumphs and transition. In 2003, she experienced great loss and became a widow with 5 children under the age of 18. During this time of swift transition, her passion for those grieving was fostered. She is the author of the book Good Grief, which endeavors to take a negative connotation and provide another perspective, as she is a believer in purposeful pain. That is a very deep concept. She spends much of her time as a grief coach, currently writing her sophomore book and raising her children. So I'm going to bring on Miss Natasha, and we're going to get into tonight's topic of grief and what I want you guys to take away. So I've read the book, and it's a great book, but and I'll let her explain it. And it's not what many would expect from a book on grief. And a lot of books try to walk people through grief and tell you about the grief process and the stages of grief and things like that. I think this book is it's very good in the sense that it's more of a memoir, and it allows you to understand her journey, but it helps you figure out your journey on your own. Because as we all know, grief is a personal process. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Miss Natasha Sims. And hello, Natasha. Can you hear me?
I can. I can.
All right. So welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast, Indestructible Souls. The original platform, or the ordinary platform, is mental wellness for African American men and boys. And so what I thought it was important, because a lot of men, and obviously young men, when it comes to African American or black men, therapy is still taboo to us. So,
Hmm.
so oftentimes men come to therapy or come seeking help because they've been coerced, or you know sometimes they come because they're in some type of trouble and they're trying to get out of trouble, or a loved one is kind of pushing them to come to therapy. And then I do have several people coming to me for grief counseling. So as we get started, so that's just sort of the normal platform. So thank you for coming on. And I did read the book, and I appreciate you for sharing it with us. And so hopefully we can have an in-depth conversation about your work, and then what's going to come next. So to start this off, tell us about the book and tell us what brought you to this point, and sort of give us some background.
Thank you very much. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to start the dialogue with grief, as that is what I believe is a purpose of mine. And what led me to this purpose, as you read in a part of my bio, is purposeful pain. That's what led me to this passion to discuss grief. In 2013, I lost 7 family members, and it started in February. And basically, every 2.5 months in the year 2013, a family member passed, from my father to my husband, my son's father. It just went on 2013. And I felt like I wasn't going to get out of that period of time. I could not see the light of day, so to speak. And that type of pain really just felt endless at the time. And there were several times, if you read the book, where you want to leave yourself, because you just sometimes you don't know the way out, or you don't believe there is a way out. And so I wanted to share my journey. It was my private, I will be honest, my private prayer is like most of us say, Lord, if you do this, I don't really lean to stuff like that when I talk to people about grief, but that was mine, is if you help me through this process, I would be candid, I would be honest with people and discuss it, because I did not have anyone that I could reach out to at that time that could give me anything besides you're in my thoughts and prayers.
So
And
so
go
to
ahead.
start off real quick, did so that's a lot. A lot of people, multiple family members passing away in a very short span of time. Did you seek professional help at the time?
I didn't seek therapy at
Okay.
the time. No. I did go to the library to check for different books because I had children at the time. So I did want to see if there were some things that I could read upon that could help me with raising my children and continuing to live without my spouse at that time. And I didn't see anything that I could connect to. I didn't see faces on the book covers that made me want to open it up.
Okay.
Although I purchased them, I won't lie, I purchased them.
Hmm.
But it was just, I needed to see something that I could connect to. And that's what I wanted to provide. I wanted to provide an everyday face because that's what it is. Everyone will be touched by grief.
And I think that's important because even as a therapist, you know, we're a lot of us we're general practitioners, but and what I mean by general practitioners, there are people who specialize in grief. And you bring up a good point that some you picked up some books, but they didn't resonate with you.
Hmm.
So people oftentimes don't understand. Maybe I'm not gonna say don't understand, but the grieving process is a personal process,
Hmm.
and sometimes you may not get that from a therapist or a book. So
True.
how did that play out for you?
This is why I believe it led me to grief coaching because I had, at the time when my spouse passed, between the two of us, we had 8 children together.
Mhm.
And it ranged from adult. I had adult children from 20, I think the oldest was 21 at the time. And
Mhm.
then our baby girl was 4 years old. So I needed to know how to connect with all of them in their respective places, as well as how to be okay with myself.
Right.
And at the time, I had a lot of responsibility. When he passed, we were actually pastoring together. So
Okay.
I had to make decisions on what to do, what direction to take, and deal with family. So it was just a lot of different dynamics. And at the time, my schedule didn't afford me an opportunity
Mhm.
to seek therapy. It really didn't.
Okay. So would you say that this book, because you mentioned, and you could tell us about your ministry, do you feel like this book was a part of your calling?
Yes, I do.
And so tell us a little bit more about the book, and I got some questions, but I would like for you to take the time to kind of introduce the book and
Okay.
and just sort of talk about it in general.
Okay. So the book actually was birthed because during the journey with my late spouse, before he passed of cancer. My father passed of cancer as well. And going through that, I would go live on Facebook often and communicate because we lived in Michigan at the time and my family was in California. And so I communicated with them often by going live and sharing our experiences through our doctor's visits and things that I would do to for my family to keep us going forward at the time. And
Right.
from doing that, I became familiar with communicating painful things publicly. And I didn't recognize it at the time. And when he passed, I kept going. I kept communicating. And the more I communicated, the more I wanted to communicate to people. Because, like I mentioned, I didn't have anyone who was communicating to me how they felt, the different things that they experienced. So I wanted to write this because I wanted someone to have hope. I'm sorry, I'm holding the book. I wanted someone to have hope um, that there is a journey, and the journey is doable.
Okay.
We can do it. Yeah.
So when you speak of the journey and in reading the book, and I really liked the book, and here's the part that I liked about it the most was that you told your story and but you left it open for interpretation and you left it open for people to figure out their journey.
Yeah.
Tell me why that was important for you.
It's important because I believe that grief journey, the grief journey is unique. and it's as unique as your fingerprint. So, although I can give you instruction, I don't believe that it is necessary to provide that type of instruction because your journey, even if you had a loved one that passed the exact same way that mine did, your journey is still going to be different and unique to your own feelings, your decision making, how you choose to make the decisions, and your own family dynamics. And so I wanted to share my journey and leave it open so you can know, just like the freeway, there are multiple routes to get to different destinations, but we're all going to get there. That's what I want you to know.
Okay, so let's get deeper into the book. And one of the things you talked about was wound care. Tell us about that. What is wound care?
Wound care is that's pretty important to me. During a time where my late spouse was sick, the doctors, he had been released right before hospice. Because he passed of kidney cancer, his uh, legs began to weep, and that would be fluid coming out of his legs. And I had to clean it. I became like a nurse at the time. So I had to clean it about every hour, hour and a half to keep from infection setting into his legs. And I often use illustrations to communicate what's going on the inside of a person who grieves. So at the time, I would have to clean it often. It was very painful to him. I had to apply solution. I had to wrap it. I had to ensure that it was dry, and I had to apply. It's like a condensing or a pressure type of gauze to it at the same time
Hmm.
to keep it enclosed from things getting in and also stuff getting out. So it's a multiple process to this. So I apply it to my own personal life. When I go through grief, I believe anybody, you should do wound care on yourself. You have to do the painful things sometimes. You have to make painful decisions. You have to probably cut off people. I had to move from one end of the country to another. I had to sever some ties, and I had to bring my family in close. And these are a part of the processes so you can heal,
Right.
and
So,
call it
so,
wound care.
so when we talk about personal wound care, a lot of times, and I see this oftentimes in therapy, is that people still come to therapy and hide.
Absolutely.
They say, I need help, but I'm going to hide this. And one of the quotes that you used in the book says, he who conceals his disease cannot expect to be cured. Talk about
Exposure is the first part of wound care. If you keep it covered, you don't know what's underneath. You don't know the poison that is there until you open it up.
so here's a question. Out of your losses, did it reveal other things that needed to be fixed?
Absolutely. I like to use the illustration of after the dust settles. That's what I tell people.
Hmm.
People apply that to other things in their life, but sometimes people in our lives represent those pillars,
Hmm.
and it keeps us from seeing things from another perspective. But when those people are removed from our lives, sometimes it reveals things. That's another part of the book because for myself, I was actually in a very toxic marriage.
Okay.
And this person leaving out of my life by way of death helped me to expose that I actually lived close to 10, maybe 12 years in a domestic violence situation. Had he still lived, I might not have exposed that truth.
So here's a question. Because one of the things through death, when we lose a person, people begin to idealize that person,
You're right.
their experience. And what I mean by idealize is not necessarily that they forget about the bad or
Hmm.
the indifferent, but then this person becomes so grand that they become blinded.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so how did you work through that process to where th- th- you know your grief didn't blind you, or how did you see through that?
Well, I believe for myself, what I started doing for a period of time, I was going to the cemetery multiple times a week because, like you said, you you idolize at some point the deceased. They become great to you, so great, so important when they first leave. So I was going to the cemetery multiple times. My children, I would take them there, and we're going to sit in front of the plot area and mourn together because we're doing this as a family. That's all I knew to do.
Mhm.
um, I felt comfortable. I I would stop crying at the cemetery. To a point where I felt like that was the only place that I had peace was at the cemetery. So I was doing that for a period of time, but I was dying inside, and my breath literally was leaving me.
Mhm.
So I'm going to fast forward that. After I go through this process where I'm continually doing this and not coming or trying to process or exposing myself to wound care to begin that process. One time I went to the cemetery and I heard the words that I don't have to be loyal to death. And that's what actually helped me to separate and start my process.
So okay, I'm going to tread lightly here. And so
Go.
loyal to death, and I'm gonna tell you why I tread lightly.
Hmm.
I work with a lot of clients
Hmm.
that when people tell them to get over it or let go, grieving, those are fighting words,
Absolutely.
right? So when you say you don't have to be loyal to death, I talk about honoring legacy and getting from grieving to celebration,
Hmm.
get from grieving to honoring, and living, not necessarily living out that person's legacy, but honoring that person's legacy, and honoring and living what they taught you. So when you say you're not loyal to death, that's what I hear.
Yes.
Can you explain that? Because I don't want to get in trouble. Because
Absolutely.
and here's the reason why. Here's the reason why.
Yeah.
I, clients, they will come to you, come to us as therapists, and they
Hmm.
want to be fixed, and then they want these concrete answers. There's no concrete answers to grief, right?
No.
But when I try to get them to change perspective, they don't come back.
Yeah.
So
That's
so
that.
explain that loyal, not loyal to death.
Well, um, I agree with what you're saying. I believe that when you recognize that you don't have to be loyal to death per se, you can change your perspective and recognize that you can be as loyal to life. And when you are loyal to the life that you have, it does honor the person that passed. That is when I'm living my best self. That's what I believe. By
Right,
doing what I'm doing right now and loving on those that are living, continuing to live my life in a peaceful place, I believe that brings honor to each and every person that I love
right,
because when they were living, that's what they wanted me to do.
right. And sometimes that's hard to explain.
Yes.
And like I said, I have to tread lightly sometimes. And I'll share this real quick story is when my grandmother passed away, not only did it have to challenge my faith, and we were taught all of our lives about heaven and hell, and what heaven, and my grandmother always talked about heaven. But when I have clients come to me, and my concept is, you didn't die, they did.
Hmm.
Now you still got living to do, and to honor that person, it's your duty to live your best life. And sometimes people get stuck in the grief. How 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 from your coaching standpoint, how do you help people not get stuck in grief?
I explain it with this visual that grief is a bridge. The thing that was in between me as someone's wife and first lady at the time and transitioned me to a widow and a single woman no longer a first lady. What was in between was grief. That was the connector. I explained it that it is the bridge. It is the mode of transportation. It has intention behind it, which is very difficult for people to grasp at the time.
Right.
But grief has purpose and it is intention behind it. It is used to expose you to you, what you are supposed to do with the rest of your life. That is why you're here. If you had nothing left to do, I believe you would not be here.
Right.
And so I explained that on the bridge, there are no parking spaces. There are
Mm.
no shopping malls right there so you can get out, pull your car over, and buy you some trinkets. Everybody is moving, but
Right.
they're moving at their own speed. I want people to understand that. Some
Right.
people can go 80 miles, but let me say this. Sometimes if you're like me, I don't like because I'm not a great swimmer. So sometimes I didn't want to go on bridges because they were long.
Right.
And that stopped me from going forward because I said, I'm scared. I can't swim. What if I get stuck? Sometimes when people are experiencing grief, they don't want to get on the bridge. They want to stay where they are
Absolutely.
because it's too far. They fear what's going to happen to them.
Right.
But it is built to get you to the other side.
To get you to the other side. And one of the things I try to teach my clients is, they say, well, I think about them, I dream about them,
Hmm.
and then I have these moments. I tell them to have the moments.
That's it.
You got to live through it. You got to have the moments. There's nothing wrong if anybody around you is trying to push you through those moments or not allowing you to have them. I don't know if those are the people you should confide in, but I don't know. I don't want to go there just yet. But the thing is, people have to understand grief is a process that you can't sidestep.
No.
So let's. I'm gonna move a little bit forward in the book, and so there's a couple that
All right.
I want to go to, but I'm gonna jump around just a little bit.
Okay.
So in the chapter Unplug, you talked about the moment you asked God. You went from asking God to have your husband to stay to being thankful.
Hmm.
Tell me why was that important early in your transition, and exactly what does that mean? I think I get it because, and I'll tell you why I get it. My brother passed away in '96, and he died a painful death. He passed away from AIDS.
Hmm.
Now it was inevitable, and I remember when he passed away, I praised God.
Mm.
I'm not because I don't miss my brother, not because it was because he was in so much pain, but he had transitioned. And I believe watching him before he passed away, he became and was at peace with God.
Hmm.
So it was more for him than it was for me. But explain how you went from praying, don't take him, to being thankful.
Okay. Um, a week before my late husband passed, we were at home. He was sitting in a chair. I was sitting in a chair next to him. That's the way we were every day. And he was in so much pain that he started weeping like a baby. And he was ready to go because the pain became so great. And I literally prayed until he changed his mind.
Hmm.
I don't know what led me to do that in that moment. I just couldn't. So I just prayed. That's all I knew how to do. Now, fast forward a week after that, he's in the hospital already. I called, or he called me that morning. I did not get that voicemail. I don't know why, but I didn't get the voicemail. And he was fussing about people in the hospital not giving him pain meds. Well, I ended up at the hospital. I normally went by myself. Oddly enough, my sister in law went me this day, and we're in there. Okay, let's fast forward. I go home to get the kids. On the way back to the hospital, they call me and they say, you need to get here right now. We've already tried to resuscitate him too many times. We will keep doing it because you're close. That's what they told me.
Right.
So I get there, I'm running in there. Everybody I tried to reach to come and see him, nobody answered. But when I got to his bed, they all were at his bedside. I have no idea how that happened. So I'm hollering, I'm screaming. I'm like, Lord, please. He's a young man. Everything was turning around for us at that time. And I'm like, we got all these kids. I was 36.
Right.
What am I going to do? And they put his pastor on the line and put the phone to his ear. A tear came down his face. And I changed. I'm holding his feet where he got gauze that I done put around his legs. I'm just, please, Lord, please let him say. And I just started, thank you, Lord. I just changed it. Thank you, Lord, because you let him be here.
Right.
You let things turn around for us. He turned his whole life around.
Right.
And I knew it because I was with him every day. I said, forget it. I don't have to be selfish for him to get it together because I got to see him get it together.
Right.
So if you're gonna take him, take him. Did I believe that I was gonna be okay in that moment? No. I almost feel foolish that I said take him and thank you.
Right.
But it was for me to learn that some things, no matter how hard you want it to be so, everything won't always be in your control.
Right.
You won't always have to say so.
Right.
And you got to learn to be okay with that sometimes.
Absolutely. We have to learn to be okay. And I talk about my brother, my grandmother, and there's been other people who passed away that were close to me. But that grief process, and and sometimes it may come across as insensitive to some people. I don't think so, but then that's just me.
I
Is is their death, their transition, their reward, if you're a believer,
Yeah,
about them, and at some point it has to stop being about me. And 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 so sometimes, you know, I have people who come to me, and not just they're grieving, it could be death, it could be grieving other things, but what, for me it had to be a transition that this was, you know, we believe in Easter, we believe in the resurrection, we
hmm,
believe in all of these things, but then when we grieving, we make it, to a degree, I think we make it about us. That's just my opinion. And so, and I'm treading lightly because I don't want to piss anybody off. But for me, and one of the things I try to teach is, when you have, and people often say, well, what if they die this way? What if they die that way? What if they die this way? And they try to compare how a person passed away. And so, what I guess what I'm asking you is, regardless of how the person passed away, how do you coach people to find peace with it?
I don't believe that you can compare pain. I
Okay.
don't believe that you can weigh pain and that it will you can measure it. I don't think pain can be measured.
Hmm.
In the hospital, how they have that scale, 1 to 10, tell us how you feel.
Right.
When it comes to grief, I don't think you can do that.
Right.
Or you can say, oh, it's a 3 today. No, it either is or it's not, you
Hmm.
know. And no matter how a person passed, you have to respect people
Right.
and their grief and their pain. And some people leave here in their sleep, and then others, as harsh as this sounds, some people, family members, have been dismembered.
Right.
Some people's family have been executed. There was an execution recently.
Right.
It's all various ways that people will leave here. But what I believe, as sure as I'm right here, is that if he allowed it, or if you have been in a position where you are here
Hmm.
and they are no longer here, that there will be and there is peace for you. It is available to you. There is life available to you. There is joy available to you. But the key to that, I believe, is for you to mourn, for you to grieve.
Right.
If you avail yourself to that, you will see the other side. But you will never see it if you don't grieve.
Right.
You will never experience joy if you don't mourn. So I encourage people to
Mhm.
do that.
Right.
That's why I prefer to live as a coach
Okay.
because of versus and we when we said this, if I could just segue as far as coach, what led me to do this instead of doing or grief therapy, what I believe the difference is.
Okay.
For me, being the grief coach is I I may not necessarily just like a basketball coach. I'm not on there playing, but listen, I know what it takes
Hmm.
and I know how to admonish you
Right.
to do what you need to do to win in this area in your life. But what works for you may not work for the next person. A good coach can do that. A good coach can go to any team and set it up to win.
Right.
But that's important for us to understand that. You have to be able to recognize who you're with. And that's a gift that I believe that I have. It's a sensitivity to discern the person.
Right. And one of my approaches with grief therapy, and we talked about this before offline, is I understand that people's grief is personal to them. And for
Hmm.
me, my job is simply to provide a safe place to heal, a safe place to go through the grief, and then the safe place to process and begin to put things together. I don't offer much advice. And what
Right.
I mean by that, I'm not going to sit here and teach you the stages of grief and tell
Mm-mm.
you go do this, go do that. This is simply a safe place to come and get things out. And today, if you don't want to grieve, guess what? We're not going to talk about that.
All right.
And then on the days you want to grieve, let's do it. Let's transition real quick because there's a lot more, but and I don't want to have to rush. You talked about spring cleaning, and there's a list of things that people need to do to the cleansing process.
Yeah.
And I believe I understand it, but there's several things on the list, and I would like for you to go down the list and tell us what the spring cleaning in terms of the grieving process is about.
Okay. So this, here's the list. I'll go straight to the list. It says, I will never choose anyone over my children. I will always listen to myself. I will speak up. I won't be afraid. If I feel anything that disturbs me about a future with someone, I will run. I won't hesitate to leave a relationship if I want to. If he cheats, I'm out.
Okay.
Oh, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there.
Tell us tell us why this spring cleaning was important during this process.
Spring cleaning was important. And this took place after I became a widow. I was completely single and dateless for 2 years. In that time, I needed spring cleaning. I had come through so much, and as we had discussed, that so much is revealed after a person passes. And those things rise to the surface when you're on your grief journey. And I could no longer sweep it under the rug. I needed to clean it out. And I began to write this list. But this list that I wrote was developed from my pain and from trauma that I experienced. So the list wasn't necessarily beneficial to me. This
Okay.
was just written in a moment where it's like I was hurt. So I'm going to run. If I need to run, I will run. or I won't choose anyone over my children. All of those things, some of them sound good, but some of them are extreme.
Right. But one of the things I noticed in the book, you talked several times about making bad choices and putting
Hmm.
other people and things before you. And,
Yes.
and here's why that's detrimental, especially when you're going through the grief process, is
Hmm.
if you're used to taking care of other people and deflecting and avoiding, how are you supposed to heal yourself?
You can delay the process. Like I say, when you're on that bridge, you can definitely delay. I believe for a long time I was probably just waiting at the beginning of the bridge. It took me a minute to actually start my own journey because I was considering everyone else. And a lot of times, those who grieve, it's funny, people come to the funeral and they give you words and they're sending you flowers. But a lot of times, the people that are on the front row or the first few rows are the ones who are most concerned about everyone else.
Right,
And how are they going to process it? Well, that was me,
right,
concerned about everyone else and delaying my own journey. But once I started this spring cleaning, that helped me to get things organized, move things out of the way, things that should not have been there. I should have been the first person to take care of myself,
right.
especially because I have children that I need to continue to take care
Absolutely.
of.
So
Hmm.
we're running short on time, and I have one last. It's like a 3 or 4 part question, so we'll get to it. And then after this, I really want you to tell people where they can get the book at, and then we'll close with some closing thoughts. But here's the question. It's through your process, what did you discover about yourself through the grief process? And then you talk about in the final chapter, you talk about taking control of your future, dream again, regroup, rediscover, and get in your zone. So I just want you to sort of end this whole conversation with talking about those things.
I'm like, man, that sounds good. I wrote that. Okay. Um, well, I spent a lot of time, as you have read in that book. I'm I'm currently 43, but I spent a lot of years making bad choices in my life. Um, as a mother, I made a lot of wrong choices, and as a wife, I made a lot of wrong choices. Even after the fact of being single again, that's when I really started realizing that I need to do something different with myself, for my children. And for the first time, I felt like it wasn't too late to do something different. I actually felt like I was right on time
Okay.
where I was at 36. I felt right on time. That's when everything could clear out and I could rearrange things. And what it taught me about myself is that I was strong for so long. A lot of times, the decisions that I made because I thought I was weak.
Hmm.
So I went with what people said and what people recommended for me. When they said stay, when they didn't have the details, I went with that because I didn't think I was strong enough to make my own decision,
Right.
although I'm making decisions. And a lot of people do that. So this taught me that I was strong. I had to do some very difficult things. At the time when my husband passed, I was his third wife, and we had custody of his two children from his second marriage. So I continued to raise them with the three that I had. I made a tough decision at the time to allow them to experience life with their mother. And that crushed me to my core.
Hmm.
But it taught me. It taught me. The only reason why I was able to allow, here, you do need to go with them because they were torn, because they were concerned about me too.
Right.
And they cared for me. But I said, I made an impression on them. I made an impact. And that's what I was supposed to do. So I was able to make a decision and say, you'll never forget me, and I know this. Doing things like that taught me that I was strong. apologizing to my children for decisions that I made that was incorrect showed me I was strong. And then I had to walk away and say, you know what? God didn't call me to pastor. He called my spouse to do that.
Okay.
So I don't have to do that because people want me to.
Right.
So I had to make a tough decision. All of these things showed me, girl, you could do this. He put it in you. If I'm walking that out, it was already there to begin with, but I had to discover it. So I deal with that discovery zone. That's one of the things I really enjoy discussing because there was things that I liked from the beginning. If you know me, you know I hate vegetables, or I hated once upon a time. Didn't eat nobody's vegetable. The soup, if you make me a red vine soup, then we was chilling. We was good. But so I did not like a vegetable at all. But what I discovered is, wait, I like Brussels sprouts. I like steamed vegetables. These are things that I would not have tried before. But your taste change, your desires change, and you have to figure those things out. And the only way to figure it out is to test it, is to try it.
Right.
And when you do that, it will open up a new world to you. And I believe that that is the blessing that comes with grief. I know that's why I say it's purposeful pain.
Right.
When I get to talk to people about this, people mistake. See, go ahead. I'm done.
No. So
I your hand.
because you're touching on something, and I want you to talk to it. Um, is because you had to care for your husband
Hmm.
when he, and I have several clients who, whether they had to care for a spouse, they've had to care for children who were terminally ill and things like that. And so their lives were centered around
Hmm.
that loved one that passed away. So I think this discovery zone is important because sometimes people struggle to let that go
That's right.
when their life is centered around caring for that loved one. Can you
Mhm.
talk about why the discovery zone of regrouping and all those things is so important, especially if you built your life around caring for a loved one?
I believe it's important because it's as difficult as it is coming to terms with a person like how you have on the program a sunrise and a sunset. The recognition that that was for this individual and then yours. See, right now I'm in between the sunrise for myself. I had to recognize that. And so some of those things I had to part ways with with all the gauze that I had, all the medicine that I had of his, the toilets that I had, the portable potties, and all of these things that consumed my life. Everything. Me personally, I'm only sharing for myself. I literally parted ways with everything that we had together except for a bracelet, a t shirt, and the hospital gown that he had on in the hospital. That's it. I had to part ways with it all. And I left Michigan, came back to California, and had to start that process on discovering who I am by myself. By myself. It is tough to
Right.
do that, but it is necessary. I explain that as if we're married and you widowed, you go through a withdrawal process because you talk about, and I share this with people, that you have someone that you were once intimate with, that you once were spent time with, and it is no longer. You weren't prepared for that. So your body goes through withdrawals that you weren't expecting.
Right.
And those are things people don't talk about. So I went through that process. My mom was a widow too. So we are there together watching my mother. She is uh, entering the dating world. My mother was married for 35 years from the time she was 21. So the dating world now,
Yeah.
you have no choice but to go through a discovery zone.
So
There's no more putting change in the machine to call no one.
right.
It's not the same. So I discuss this with people because things do change. Everything, as a matter of fact, changes.
And so rediscovering yourself, regrouping, reconnecting, and taking control. And I think that is so important. And we'll end on that note. So please do me a favor and promote your book. Tell people where they can get it. For those of you out there, it's well written. I want to applaud you. I read some books that were put out independently and but very well written. And so I want to applaud you on that. It's a very easy read. And like I said before, the thing I like about it the most, it talks about Natasha's journey, but it allows you to figure out your own journey. And I like that about just books in general. So please promote it, tell people where they can get it, and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, this is my baby. This is my first kid. Good grief. And I'm very proud of it. My heart is in it. And I want to share that with the world. I want to encourage people to read the book because I don't believe it's solely focused on grief. This is about life and about the journey of it. And I believe that anyone that picks it up can relate to it. You can find yourself in there or someone next to you that may be dealing with something like this. It's very helpful to anyone. And it's not that long, but I do agree, if I say so myself, it's well written. So it's a page turner. It's some plot twists in there, but I believe that it will leave you with encouragement. You can find it on Amazon under my name, Natasha Sims, and get it for yourself. Get it for someone. I want to tell you that if you get it, don't just buy it to support a black woman, but buy it to support yourself because I believe it will help you and you can find yourself in there even if you're not the person experiencing grief and you're the supporting cast. This is going to help you figure out how to hold up the arms of someone else that may be going through. Maybe you see them experience some things that you can relate to in this book. When you can recognize it, it can teach you how to support them and how to be there for them. So, as I always say to everyone, as I believe that grief is a bridge, that you are going somewhere. I believe that with all of my heart.
Absolutely. So thank you for coming on, taking the time out, and it was a pleasure, and I love the discussion. And so thank you, and I'm going to say good night. So this has been Indestructible Soul, and for those of you, please thank Natasha. You can send her messages and all that good stuff. And this has been Indestructible Soul, and we're going to see you next week. And thank you very much. We're out of here.